I'd like to call to order the November 27th meeting of the New Ulm Human Rights Commission. Any changes to the agenda, additions at all? Okay, the agenda stands approved as distributed. Has everybody had a chance to read over the minutes from last month? Any changes, updates? Minutes stand approved as submitted. I'd like to call Police Commander Dave Borkert up to the podium. He's gonna talk with us about the body camera potential for New Ulm Police Department. Oh, sorry. I don't have to say that all over again, do I? Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I'm Dave Borkert. I'm a commander with the New Ulm Police Department. And I had shared with the chairperson if possibly the Human Rights Commission would be interested in being involved with our community input regarding body cameras as far as developing policy and practices utilizing that. I don't know how much you've maybe followed it. Maybe you might know more about it than I do even, or some of you may not know, maybe haven't heard much about it, but the city of New Ulm is going to be going towards implementing body cameras, and we are approved for a matching grant, a relatively large grant. Part of that grant requirement is that we're obtaining community input regarding policy development, like for example, when the camera's going to be on, reasons why it wouldn't be put on, rights to privacy, and those type of issues. And they're really looking for community involvement with that and that input. Regardless if we had a grant or we hadn't pursued a grant, I think it's just sensible to have that type of input. And I when we're going over that, they had made some recommendations as far as church groups and various organizations like that. And I think all of that, we're all the community. But I really think that this would be a logical, sensible place to start, and maybe, inviting those groups here, and having that public, appearance and having that public input, because all your meetings are posted, and we want that. We want as much community involvement as possible. So I guess just with that introduction, I'm just looking if that's something that you consider reasonable, something you'd maybe want to work on with us, or is there maybe another area, other suggestions that I could follow?
I think not only input, but you're going to get a lot of questions that people are going to have about the use and whatnot. So I think it's a really good idea that we have a forum here.
Mm-hmm.
Commander, when are you looking at scheduling these discussions with the public?
The chief has just appointed certain individuals to be on, like, the police department's committee on it, and they haven't even had their first meeting yet.
Okay, so you're looking at 2018?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It'll be throughout 2018, and I don't know if we have a real serious time crunch because we're trying to get it ahead of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I always think sooner the better, and I don't think it should be limited to one meeting. I think as far as the overall requirement of that, I don't think they have necessarily a set number of meetings or a set number of the community that we need to receive input from. But like I said, I think this is a sensible location and venue, and I think just everything you stand for, and you're looking out to protect, I think certainly falls within areas that we want to focus on. And like I said, I would like to have it where we're advertising, where we're if we could have this room crowded, or if we could even have it maybe in an alternate location, or if we have to have workshops. And that's something that I'm looking for that type of guidance as well. It's not maybe even a workshop or continuation of a meeting regarding a workshop would be sensible. And that's what I'm inquiring. What do you think would be possible, and what do you think would be sensible?
Well, I don't think there's any better commission or group to best scrutinize policy than us, to be able to work together with the police department, everything what we suggest or what we can come to on terms or what we can
Yeah.
review for you. I think in the end, you know, if there does happen to be any issues, you know, you can come back to us and say, you know, we worked this out, and I think it looks good for each department to, you know, have somebody like us who we are here for the rights of civilians and for everyone, that, you know, if we can be here to scrutinize or to help you throughout, it would be a great idea, I think.
Just for clarification, are you looking at holding this at a Human Rights Commission meeting, or are you looking at a committee from the Human Rights Commission to participate in this? Or you want the whole works there?
I'm actually asking what you think would work the best, because this is the very earliest stage, very first part of the planning process. I kind of assumed that maybe there'd be some interest, but
Definitely.
Well, I think there's interest, but I think we need to have a committee to do that.
I kind of,
I don't think we need all of us there. Simply because quorums and things like that would come into play, perhaps. I'm not sure.
Just a little bit of background information. Are there any guidelines already established by other police departments that are already using them, or where are you going to start? Where is the Lyon Police Department going to start adopting whatever rules, measures for using those cameras?
well, you mean regarding the
What's
panel?
already in existence? What rules? Like, for example, Minneapolis already uses them, right?
There's several departments, even the sheriff's office.
Oh, so it's not the whole city. So there's individual departments.
I'm
in
just talking about the
different
New Ulm
cities.
Police Department, the city of New Ulm. There's some departments already, I don't know if I'm being clear on that, but there's some departments that already, they chose a different method. I mean, there was individuals that were using them, some departments were using them around here, 2-3 years ago already. I personally, I think you have to be careful. One of the biggest deals, and I'm not gonna speak above my food chain, but one big issue initially was data retention. And when you're talking about the Minnesota Public Data Act, what can you provide? Because if you collect it, when the government collects something, there's a presumption that it's public. Well, now when you're dealing with people's homes and certain things are private, now you have juveniles in there, and sometimes some of the situations that we encounter, maybe individuals aren't dressed like they wanted to be dressed when they're going to a public meeting or something like that. So there's those privacy issues that come into place, but you're still dealing with that presumption that if we're collecting it, it's public.
So my question is there any federal or state rules that apply that you have to comply with? Or you pretty much do it, just do it as you go along?
Well, there's certainly laws and there's rules that we'd have to practice. So, like, for example, what I'd be looking for is, and I've talked with the chief about this, and we'll be discussing this with the committee, just as far as updates. So I think this is going to be, the first of a series of meetings even before we have that first meeting, and we might have several meetings. I mean, because I'd like to have as much community involvement and input as possible from anyone interested, whether we're going to, civic organization, Kiwanis, Lions, things like that, if we're going to their meetings and looking for input, or if we can just, collectively gather that at, one setting and have all those individuals and those organizations represented and invited to something like that. But there's certainly, rules and laws and established maybe best practices that we're getting from the Post Board, which is our licensing board, Peace Officer Standard and Training Board, that, we certainly want to capture and be able to reasonably accomplish. So, I think it's going to be, a lot of putting thinking hats on and saying, is this the best fit for our community? Because, the city of New Ulm is different than, even though we're in the same state, it's a little different than the city of Minneapolis. Some of our challenges that we have are far different than what they have up there.
Right.
And so, I think that's where you want that community involvement. And ultimately, everything that we have would be reviewed by the city attorney. That's our legal counsel, and then ultimately, you know, the final say is goes in front of the city council. Because, I mean, they ultimately, so when you're talking about a quorum, that's, ultimately, it has to go in front of the city council as
Right.
far as final approval. Everything before that, even though as well thought out as everything is discussion until it's approved by the council. Does that make sense? Does that answer the
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, so we do have input. The community will have input. Yeah, there's, yeah.
We're striving for that, absolutely.
Is
And
there-
I was, you know, kind of hoping that maybe this could be the launch pad. You know, and even, you know, if you're established a certain committee, I mean, everything we do, I think, should be as far as public workshops. You know, public's invited openly. So, I mean, if you have a certain committee that's assigned to that, and then you have you know, everybody would still be invited. You know, I think a logical spot would be right after one of these meetings. Or before one of these meetings. And that, I guess that's what I'm looking for. And I'm not trying to throw anybody, you know, I don't want to blindside anybody because, you know, I'm just presenting the subject, seeing if there's some interest, and then I think we can maybe continue to work on those details. I can report back to a future meeting and see exactly how you want to proceed.
I think we'd have to ask the city attorney if we're all here, if we've got to take minutes. If we weren't having minutes, if we didn't have it open, it would be a violation of the open meeting law. That was my concern with all of us together. If we have a committee, we don't have a quorum, it's a committee that's dealing with it. When we're all here, it kind of changes the rules a little bit.
Well,
Yes.
it's kind of like when the city council has an open meeting on whatever it may be. If somebody has a complaint about the assessment for the alley
Right.
or whatever, when there's a public meeting, I don't know that there's anything different. I don't know, minutes maybe are taken, but of course, it's all being recorded anyway, so
So we would be recording this as well, which probably wouldn't be a bad idea because it could
Yeah.
get you more participants for round number 2. My guess is your first few meetings with this, you're going to be doing the teacher thing because there's going to be a learning curve on what you can and cannot do with these sort of things.
I like that idea. I mean, I'm always one that leans towards, I just as soon have the cameras on
Yeah.
for everything we're discussing.
Right.
You know, and I know as far as the open meeting laws, I mean, first of all, if it's posted, you know, one of the biggest obstacles is that you're never having a private meeting. So, you're
Right.
usually capturing, you know, significant ground just by saying, you know, we posted it. Everybody had an
Had a chance
opportunity
to be there.
We didn't have any type of secret meetings in a back smoky room somewhere. You know, we're discussing it in front of everyone.
Plus,
And-
it'll be
and there's a
televised
recording.
as well.
Pardon me?
More than likely, it'll be televised on.
I'd like that idea.
Yeah.
You know, if we even had that, because, you know, we might get some, you know, future input, someone who can't attend the meeting, or some people aren't comfortable with the meetings for whatever reason. You know, and if we can still, you know, they still have valuable input potentially that we could utilize. I really like the idea, but again, I'm not everyone, but I like the idea of having everything televised.
I think it's a good idea.
Would you be willing to find out if other communities that have the body cameras work with their
Yes.
local human rights commission and report back or send me an email?
I could
If
I
you
could
know
try
of
I
any?
could try to gather that. I think in Minnesota it's kind of a lot of the departments. I think we're one of the first ones going through the grant process. We're not the only ones that are involved in the grant, but there's I think but I mean I could certainly try to gather some of that information. You know, early on I think there were some small departments. You know, some of the officers, some of these smaller departments were just wearing body cameras that they had either purchased themselves or they had
Wow.
access to through a department. Some departments are, especially smaller ones. And I mean, New Ulm's not a big department, but I'm talking about even smaller departments in New Ulm where they have certain discretion on doing things like that. Now that would, as an administrator, that would really concern me, that you just have one officer's wearing it and the other one's not, and they don't have a policy or, you know, established practice. I don't speak for them though. That's not my concern, but I think, you know, in Minnesota you have, it's a variety of how things were handled as far as implementation.
And that was my question. Yeah, if everybody had their own rules?
Well, currently you
They
have
kinda
them
do.
on the patrol cars, don't you? Cameras?
Yeah, we have them on the patrol cars. And this gets a little more intrusive though, because, you know, when you're actually walking up to
Right.
the location and you know, there's certainly laws apply. Generally, if you're, you know, and I would ask you to reinforce that or maybe add to something I'm missing, but generally if, you know, from the law standpoint, if I'm part of the conversation, generally it's always okay for me to record it if I'm actually physically standing there and part of it. If I don't have anything that gets into another conversation like the eavesdropping, but generally if I'm clearly part of it and I'm recording it, or if you're recording it, it's generally pretty safe ground in Minnesota. Correct me if your
Yeah,
interpretation is different than
yeah,
that.
no, generally speaking, that's pretty fair. And, you know, thanks, first of all, I guess, you know, for inviting us. I think that that's a great idea, and kind of getting to almost point about, you know, if there's kind of a framework in place that, this might be a question that, you know, we may not know until maybe the rubber hits the road, but, you know, are we working at starting from scratch, or is there like a framework already in place? Because that policy and law balance is going to be a really fine line. Just as an example, it got me thinking, okay, when you were talking about it's presumed public, okay, so a policy may be, are we going to classify this information as investigatory or other? If it's investigatory, well then now the law kicks in and says, okay, that's not public because there's an ongoing investigation, i.e. it remains private unless and until a decision is made for charging, or there's been a conviction and the appeal process is going through.
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of interplay in there, and so I wasn't sure, you know, if you were thinking, okay, I'd like to have a, you know, framework, like this is probably, you know, what we're thinking, but I don't know. Again, that's probably something that'll come down the road a little bit, but I just like the idea of us in the community getting involved with it at the ground level, which is great. So
as far as going forward, like I said, I think this is going to be, you know, more than one meeting even before we have our first workshop, if you want to call it that. And, you know, I can maybe report back and explain kind of, this is what I've talked to the subcommittee, talked to the chief, talked to the city attorney, and logically maybe we could, you know, pursue in this area. And as far as the model policies, you know, I'm very confident the League of Minnesota Cities, Association of Minnesota Counties, Sheriff's Association, Minnesota Police Chiefs Association. I mean, Post Board, there's certainly model policies out there. But, you know, we want to find something that best fits our community. And you know, as far as you know, when I say model policy, I consider that like kind of the framework that we're
Right.
meeting the legal requirements as far as like you were saying, if something is investigatory, what does that exactly mean? The community should know, should have a
Right.
right to know. And then it's like, okay, it means that.
right.
We're holding everything until there's a charging decision.
Right.
And that's just true with Minnesota Public Data Act. I mean, that's true with all our police reports and
Right,
everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
But there's also the question of whether the camera catches something, whether it's let's say, for example, that you went to a house and your camera catches somebody saying, "Oh, go hide the gun" or something like that. Is that admissible in court?
Well, that's something that
That's one of the issues.
we'd want to discuss. I'd say yes, but I
Ah.
mean, I like I said, I don't want to fast forward either.
I would say yes as well, generally speaking. It depends on who's saying it, and we don't need to digress into the rules of evidence. But, you know, kind of what I'm thinking about is where some of the difficulties are going to come in is you go into that house and you're doing an
The
investigation, and all of a
right.
sudden there's obvious juveniles that are being depicted. Okay, well, that poses a problem with who it can be released to and who it can't. Now, do we have to splice that out, and then all
Yeah.
sorts of things? And so,
Yeah.
again, that's down the road, but that would be, I think, more problematic situations like that. But
And sometimes it's not even anything criminal in nature.
No,
It's just the fact that
just
it's
the
privacy,
identity of a juvenile.
or
Uh-huh.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
a certain person is dating someone else or whatever, and now they don't want that in front of the whole world.
And I think that comes down to things that we would talk about is, okay, who's requesting it? You know, is it the media? Is it just a person who
Right.
has some sort of vested interest? It's like, okay, well, what is their real interest? And then do we delve into why do you really want it? Are you really just trying to, you know, expose some scandal? You know,
Those are very valid points. as far as us controlling, like if we're treating it like normal police reports, we're not supposed to ask anything. We're not supposed to ask, who are you and why do you want it? It's none of our business. It's either public or it's not. Now, this could be a very different situation, and I think that's where during the workshops, we need to work out those situations. And what I really see, I see this as a logical process. I mean, when I say drawn out, I don't mean where we want to draw it out longer than we have to, because I think it's important to get that technology working. At the same time, I really think we're going to have, where we're working out some of these situations, we're presenting it to our legal counsel, because everything that we have legally, we go through the city attorney. And then, maybe there's some situations that we need to further discuss as far as these workshops. And maybe there isn't, but I mean, I think we want to have, we certainly want to be open as far as, everyone having an opportunity to have their input. And, I always think the biggest thing is that we're not, there's no secret meetings or anything like that. We're really, truly, sincerely trying to get people's input on it, because it's an important issue.
Because I think you're going to have more people interested that aren't necessarily media interested in viewing a video than someone like getting a police report, for example. Most people aren't going to care. You're not going to pick up details that people want to see it. It's this, like this movie playing out. So I think you're going to have those requests, and then you got to
So
have
should
some
it
sort of
be-
policy in place on how to deal with that.
Could it be considered a police report, or is it just for the use of the police and the victim,
But that's
or the police and the person involved?
and that's what it comes down to. How do you classify
right,
it?
right.
So yeah, but I think it's a great idea.
So how would you,
I just have one comment. It seems like what's on television, and not a show, but when
yeah.
there's been something going on, the police have their camera, but it seems like there's 5 smartphones that are
Yeah.
also taking the pictures, and that, I guess, becomes personal property, and then whose is accurate?
Yeah.
That's been a problem for me when there's been a discrepancy. When one camera shows this, another camera shows that. It's kind of like a football game. They got about 7 different views to tell if it's a phone or not.
Right.
I think the use of body cameras is good for the police and for the community. It protects both.
Right.
If there's something that comes up, the body camera has recorded everything.
I agree. I know we've even gotten feedback, individuals since the sheriff's office has had it, where even defense attorneys said that clarified a lot of points, and sometimes it was even in the favor of law enforcement. It's just it's very clear that
Yeah.
what happened. You couldn't get any more crystal clear than that. So I do think there's a benefit to both, to everyone.
I agree.
So as far as going forward, can we agree that there's at least certainly interest, and then report back maybe at the next meeting as far as an update?
Yeah.
Should we take a vote as to if we would like to agree to move forward to start planning? All right.
Well, I'll move to make a committee.
All in favor?
I second.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yep.
Second?
I second.
Excellent. All in favor?
I
All opposed? All right. Then we will go ahead and have discussions on our own, start out with, what we can do to help on your end, and go from there.
And then can I, Madam Chair, can I just maybe expect to report back like at the next meeting
Yes, sir.
as far as an update?
Yes, and I can keep you posted on that date, because currently it's on Christmas Day. So we will not be here.
Oh, okay. All right. Anything else? Otherwise, thank you.
Thank you, Commander.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on. We're going to start with the Events Committee Voter Fraud Panel, which is on Thursday at 7 p.m. Is that correct?
Yeah, first of all, let me point out that we don't call it the voter fraud anymore. It's a forum on election integrity.
Election
Yeah, because we pretty
integrity
much
panel.
decided that we didn't know there was any fraud, so.
Right, that makes
I'm
sense.
part of the forum. They are going to present the findings of the league. They went out, they interviewed people, they did some field research, so that's going to be part of the forum.
Excellent.
as you all know, Dan is going to be part of the forum. He's going to present the human rights aspect. He's going to talk about the human rights aspect of voting and having representation.
Yep, voting as
That'll
a
be great.
basic human
Mhm.
right, essentially.
And I know somebody already volunteered. I am going to need help checking the microphones, checking the projector, moving some tables. So I would appreciate some help.
And this is at
And
the
we're
community
going to
center.
start, yeah, it's at the community center. We're going to start around 5 o'clock setting up. And it'll go until 9 o'clock.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
Does anybody have any
Push forward.
questions about
About
the
the-
panel?
No, but I can come help set up.
wonderful. That'll be great.
Excellent. Moving
Great.
on, oh, go ahead. Does somebody have something to say? Okay. Just as a reminder, the Human Rights Symposium is December 12th and 13th in St. Paul. If anybody would like to attend, please contact Lisa. And then don't forget to keep track of your mileage so you can submit for reimbursement on that as well. Human Rights Award is next. Any updates, Lori? or
Yeah,
Emma?
I gave Tim a suggestion for the nomination to be put on the paper, the request for nomination to be submitted to the paper, and pretty much you approved. I think you just changed it a
I
little bit.
changed
Yeah.
just a few
Yeah,
things, just
a few
to get
things,
the
yeah. And so he's-
nomination on the top instead of on the bottom to talk about that.
and that makes sense. Yeah.
And put the deadline in here.
Mm-hmm.
And I forwarded it off to the editor, so.
Great.
Thank you very
So
much.
It should be coming. I didn't really know exactly when the deadline is, but I figured December 31st would be a good deadline, so that we'll be ready for next year. And along those lines, I would like to make a submission of my own, just for the commission. Would you like me just to write a little thing and present it to the commission? Or do you want to just hear what I would suggest for nominees?
I think since we don't have it on the agenda right now, and we still
Our
have a
next-
meeting
for
before
next
the
meeting?
next, yep, for the final submission date, we should all, maybe possibly everybody come with a name or an idea,
If
and
somebody,
then we can discuss it at the December meeting. Excellent.
it's good.
Madam Chair, when
Yes.
you say come with a name or submission, I apologize. I missed last month, so I didn't get the groundwork on.
The
on
Human
what that-
Rights Award for, do you want to explain?
Do you just, but it,
As a name for somebody who, in the community, who is active or, stands out with somebody who is a human rights activist. Moving on to the Education Committee report, video contest. Looks like we have set a few things, but rules and guidelines should be ready by this meeting is what.
We have a draft already in place. I think we were waiting on the budget approval before we decided on the amount of the awards.
Mayor knows. Mr. Mayor, do you know if the budget for next year has been approved?
The final vote, no, has not been. There have been cuts, a lot of cuts, so I'm not sure what has been cut and what hasn't been cut, and some of the cuts may have an uphill battle getting approved. There may be a lot more people at the next city council meeting.
Yeah.
All right.
Can we find out where we stand regarding the budget? Where would we access that information?
Nicole Jorgensen,
Okay.
Finance Office.
Should probably contact Nicole and see where we sit.
We can do that.
Once then, we could fill in the amounts for the prizes and we could submit that as a draft for review for the rest of the commission. I think you've all seen, I sent around late summer drafts of the rules and the guidelines. But the amounts we needed, and the dates will need to adjust as well.
Excellent, thank you. Excellent. Moving on to diversity training. Did anybody request for this to be added to the agenda?
Well, we talked about it in the last meeting. I
Okay,
don't know
good.
if, I think what we do need to do is maybe have somebody research if there is diversity training in other cities and what are the sources or who would provide that training.
I think it came out of the race meeting.
Government Alliance.
Yeah, yeah. That some mentioned that some cities require diversity training for all of their employees, up to 4 hours of training, paid training, I would assume. And some asked whether or not New Ulm does any diversity training at all. That would be something maybe we could research first, find out what we do for diversity training. Probably through human resources would be whoever handles the human resource elements. And then we could research what other communities are doing of similar size for diversity training.
Thank you. Did somebody want to contact HR and check about diversity training here with New Ulm?
I can do that.
Thank you, Tim. Moving on to the current human rights issues, number 7, proactive education. Looked like this we were looking at possibly partnering with Martin Luther College or the Diversity Council for Martin Luther, for the Martin Luther King celebration. Wanted to discuss about if it was a conflict of interest due to the religious connection. Just on my opinion, we talked about how the Salvation Army was a religious organization and that they're known to have had some issues with LGBTQ discrimination. My feeling, not knowing 100% about what MLC background stands for, kind of only knowing a little bit about it, I feel that we would need to bow out of working with MLC as we did with the Salvation Army for the same reasons, as well as adding women's rights and leadership roles as a reason for not partnering with them. Any other comments or concerns?
I would agree.
Yeah.
Does it agree with everybody?
Yeah.
Do we need to take a vote on that? Let's just
We
take a
could.
vote.
All right.
Yeah, did we have a formal invitation for this? I wasn't here.
No, I think we were just brainstorming ideas
Okay,
for the
right,
Martin
So
Luther
then
King Day.
I
at that
wouldn't
point,
say
yeah.
vote. Okay.
No.
Excellent. Then proceeding to the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. Equity?
Quality?
I know, it's,
Yeah,
in-
I know.
it says equity all the way through, and I questioned it, so I'm just gonna say equality. Government Alliance on Race and Equality. There's an info session in St. Paul on the 30th of November from 1 to 3 p.m. They develop racial equality and on how to sponsor with cities and counties and other local governments to develop strategies on racial equality. This might be a good idea to keep up with or kind of research a little more, especially if we're going to be looking into the diversity training. thoughts, comments? Don't leave me hanging, guys.
That's this Thursday, you said?
Yes, this Thursday. I am not able to make a meeting for that, the info session at all. I would like to keep up with it, kind of check back, and we do have contact information for the group, so we can always check in with them, get updates. That
So,
works for everybody.
Monthly meeting type of thing, or quarterly, or?
This, they said this was just an information session.
And who's sponsoring this again?
The Government Alliance on Race and Equality, in partnership with the League of Minnesota Cities. It's a nationwide affiliation of local governments working on race equality to bring insight and approaches and strategies. I think what I'd like to do is see if we can find out more information about it, and if this is something, or if this is a group we'd like to partner with, possibly for our own community with like the diversity training. See if it's actually something that would work well in that situation.
As I understand it, this meeting is to really provide kind of an overview for the cost training that they've listed in their document.
Correct.
And are we a GARE member, GARE member?
I do not
Oh,
believe so.
Yeah, so you're looking at
It's a pretty hefty.
pretty hefty fee,
But New Ulm is part of the League of Minnesota Cities, though.
right? That's why I was asking if that's connected or not.
We have Kevin's contact information for the League of Minnesota Cities, so I can check in with him and see how that works, if it, flows over. And bring that information to our next meeting. And that leads us into the date of the next meeting. Currently, it is on Christmas Day. So we can check with Lisa, because I'm not sure what other meetings. I know everybody else is going to be attempting to reschedule as well for that week, I'm assuming. I'm going to go from there. If there's another time, we obviously need to get it in before the 31st. So what I can do is I'll contact Lisa tomorrow and see what the schedule looks like.
Right, she's
And
gonna
then-
know the best
Yeah.
probably and what's
Exactly.
available.
And then let everybody know.
Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else that they would like to add?
I have one or two things, Madam Chair. I know a few months ago, I just started thinking some of the things that our commission was talking about a handful of months ago, and I'm not sure if they just kind of fell off the table, or maybe we're working on them and we just hadn't talked about them recently. But I know that one thing that we had talked about is like the formal role of the commission. I know that that was one thing that we were looking into. I was just wondering if that is going to be something that we want to get back into. And then we also discussed student commissioners, and I don't know if that's been revisited. And I know we had some turnover, and my thinking is we're going to have some more turnover. So I thought maybe if we could get some, I don't know where we ended up with that, but maybe some direction, so that way when the new people come in, we can kind of
Have a
get them
clear-
involved right away with some things.
We were waiting on this.
To the first issue with the the formal role and the format of the Human Rights Commission, when we did the research, one of the things that I think Ron was going to serve as the liaison to the city council, and he has since left the commission. So
That was-
we'll need one of us from that subcommittee to serve as a liaison to meet with the city council or the city manager or the mayor, whoever's responsible for the role.
Okay.
But we discussed, I believe, and I think I still have minutes from that, but we discussed some revisions into the job, into the description of the committee, of the commission. So it would be.
Does that committee maybe want to reassemble
re-meet.
at reassemble at some point, and maybe just refresh our recollection as far as where we were going, and maybe someone will volunteer for that to fill that void. So,
like to see that in February or March. Let's get the new people
okay.
kind of situated, figure out where they're going to, excel or be best placed, and kind of go from there. It gives us a little time.
I agree, that's a little more in-depth, so that's probably a good idea.
Go
Student commissioners is the other one.
Yeah, the student commissioners, are we putting,
That was dependent on
City
the city
council.
council.
ah,
Yep,
Yeah.
so it's all kind of rolling.
Okay.
okay. All right.
I did want to add, I just thought of this. I am in school full-time online right now. I go to MSU full-time. I'm taking 16 credits next semester, plus I do work full-time. I would like it if somebody would be able to take over my chair position, because I want to remain on the committee or the commission. I just don't have the time after the first of the year to be able to put in the time that I need.
You'll have to elect officers in January.
Yes, yep. And just, that was just putting it out there for everybody who is gonna be here in January to think if they would like to help me out. Yes,
I
sir.
think they would like you to elect your officers in December.
No.
All right.
Why? Because it has happened in the past where a steamroller came through and a person who was brand new on a commission became chair, and it's kind of tough.
Yeah, that's a big.
Okay, I'll make sure that that gets added to December, the December agenda.
And Madam Chair, in order to maybe assist in that, I would like if you could just distribute a detailed, really, just complete outline of all your daily activities. So
I don't
that,
think
so that we
so.
can make a more
Right.
informed,
Okay.
an informed decision. I think all of us would like to know what we'd be getting into.
I-
I'm
I can
joking.
do that.
I'm joking. You don't have to do that. I'm kidding. Yeah, right.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to add before we adjourn? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Right.
All right.
So adjourned.